Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd asked Rona not to go on at length because this makes me feel as if I'm dead, you know, and this is my eulogy. It's the only time you ever hear things like that said about you. But anyway, thank you so much. And thanks for Rod and the tree reading series, and thank you all for being here. I thought I would just give you a sampling of my work. So I'm going to read some poetry and a bit of prose from my various books, which represent my work over a long period of time. I'll start off reading a couple of short poems from Over the Roofs of the World, which is, a lot of the poems in here are about birds. And some are about what I call yard fowl, because I think yard fowl are as worthy of poetry as the peacocks and the other magpies and fancy birds that are in this book. And I'll just read rooster and hen. Rooster. As long as a rooster somewhere is angry enough to claw at the sun, blood red rising, and pull it through, day will come, the world will go on. And hen starts with a Jamaican saying which goes, woman luck like dungle heap, fowl come scratch it up. Which is, the woman's luck is in the garbage, and it's a fowl that brings it to the surface. Some find you loudmouth and simple. For every egg laid, a big announcement, a cackle. Some find you the broody hen, not knowing all is meant to throw spies off the scent of your blood secret. You know the sky isn't falling. Geese don't lay golden eggs. Superior knowledge resides in the feet. You are mistress of maps to the underlayer, to buried treasure. Why else do you nod your head and give thanks as you sup? With every scratch, woman's luck, you turn up. And my book Shell, well, there seems to be a lot of shells in my book, but the theme of this is, I'm just using the metaphor of shell in this book to talk about really very serious things, such as the history of the plantation, the sugar plantations and slavery in the Caribbean. But I'll just read one or two brief poems that deal literally with shells. This one, you can't see it, but it's in the shape of an egg, which is broken at the end. I love to do sort of concrete poems like this. And I always think of a little bird inside the shell floating around in there, and then one day, of course, bang, the shell breaks and it's out in the world. So this is in the voice of that little bird, and this is all lowercase, because I'm thinking of it as a very little voice, which goes, the poem is called Hatch, and it goes, what if I didn't want out? If happy in here, floating from one end to the other in this whatchamacallit, one day open just a peep show, crack, jump back girl, back from the sound of breaking, blast from the light let in. Once lines get crossed, there's no turning back. Flood waters sweep me through the hatch. Hello world, tap. Crumbling walls, shell out. Set me up for life, for breaking. And I'm doing the easy things first. This gets more serious as we go along. But I wanted to share a little poem with you in my book, Gardening in the Tropics, which is about plants. And it does end up in the gardening section of bookstores, believe it or not. I'm going to read a little poem called Ginip. I don't have to explain it to the West Indians who are here. But for those of you who don't know, Ginip is a fruit that grows on a really big tree in the Caribbean and South America. And it grows in clusters like grapes, and it has a green skin, and you crack the skin with your teeth. It's like a lychee in terms of the texture. You crack the skin, and then there's a large seed, there's flesh surrounding a large seed, and it's children's favorite fruit. But children are told if you swallow Ginip seed, it will grow inside of you because it's quite dangerous to children. I don't know what the Canadian equivalent is. I keep hearing different versions of what it is that your mothers tell you you're not to swallow. But anyway, I wrote this little poem. The explanation actually is longer than the poem. But the reason I want to read it is that a friend of mine shared this poem with her grandchildren, or shared the book with her grandchildren. This was her favorite poem, and a little girl who was then 11 wrote a story which takes off from the last line of this poem. So I'll read you the poem, and then I'll tell you the story that this little girl wrote. Ginip. Our mothers have a thing about Ginip. Mind you don't eat Ginip in your good clothes, it will stain them. Mind you don't climb Ginip tree, you will fall. Mind you don't swallow Ginip seed, it will grow inside you. Our mothers have a thing about Ginip. They're secretly consuming it. So the story goes, once upon a time there was this mother sitting on the back steps with a big bowl of Ginip in her lap. And she's eating Ginip, eating Ginip, eating Ginip, and she goes, because she swallowed one. So she has a pain in her belly, and then her belly starts to grow. So she goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, don't worry, you're going to have a baby. So she goes to the hospital to have the baby, and what does she have? Any guesses? She has a baby Ginip tree. So the story goes, like a good mother, she takes her strange offspring home and she plants it in the garden. And the tree grows up and it bears, and what does it bear? No, human babies, of course. So the story goes, like a good mother, the good mother's planted the tree. The story goes, her 13 brothers and sisters, their 13 brothers and sisters, come out to greet their strange new siblings, and they hold hands and they dance around the tree, singing a little song they made up for the occasion, which goes, we not eat Ginip anymore, for it give we plenty picnic, and it make we poor. Picnic, of course, are children. So while I'm on this note of children and so on, I want to share with you something I did recently. I have a children's book coming out next year that's called Birthday Suit, because it's about a little boy of about 4 who refuses to wear clothes, which I think is familiar to a lot of people. Anyway, it's from a series of poems that I wrote. I was in Jamaica supposedly writing something serious, and I was by the sea, staying in Ocherius. And I wasn't by a beach. All I could see, I had an apartment, all I could see in front of me was the sea, just the sea. And that was fascinating to me because I'd never sort of had this type of encounter just with the sea before. And I was fascinated by the seabirds. So one day I just wrote this little poem, which I'll read to you, and it ends in snap. Something goes snap, and I thought, wow, this is so cool. So I then wrote down all the things that could possibly go snap that I could think of. You know, like, a camera or skipping rope, etc., etc. And every day for 12 days I wrote a snap poem. And I mean, they're poems for children. You know, I was just killing myself laughing because I was enjoying writing them, right? And so I'll read you the first one, and then I'll read you another one of these snap poems. The first one I wrote is called Fish. Kingfisher standing still in the shallow water, staring at its reflection. Fish on the reef beneath, unaware of its intention. Having been to finish in school, fish thinks it's cool to look up and declare, "There, there, you're wearing dirty underwear." Snap. Sheesh. So I'll read you another one, which I want it on record that I wrote this at least 2 years before this very incident was headline news all over the world. Okay? It's called The Runaway Balloon. Why is everyone standing in the backyard staring up at the sky? It's for when Beauregard and his runaway balloon pass by. For Beau keeps circling round, while Grandpapa, who is nimble as can be, is up in this very tall tree, holding a very long stick, to hook the balloon and bring Bo down. And Grandmama is watching the sky through a telescope and holding up Bo's favorite blueberry pie to tempt him to the ground. The women of the town, all except Mrs. Swizzle, have sewn all their blankets together. And Bo's dad and the other men are holding it stretched out in case Bo can make a soft landing, though they're not sure, since they know of no one who has gone up in a bubblegum balloon before. "Oh, my poor baby," wails Bo's mom. "Well, he always was a flighty one," declares Mrs. Swizzle from next door. "She raised him wrong. Any sensible mom would have been keeping tabs by checking under his bed for bubblegum wrappers. That's what I would have done." All this kerfuffle is no surprise to anyone with a grain of sense. Why, from the age of 4, he's been talking through his hat about flying away in his own balloon. If it was my Raymond here, I'd have given him a swat, and that would have been that. Mrs. Swizzle smacks her hands together to show the squashing of Raymond, who sniffles by her side. Actually, though he wouldn't say, Ray would dearly love to have gone on that ride. Now, Bo is the hero of all the kids on the block who watched him blow double bubblegum balloons bigger and bigger and bigger. How did he do that? Now, they'll never know. Each time Bo came home and told his mom, "Guess what? I blew a bigger one today. Soon I'll blow one so big it will take me aloft and I'll fly straight away to the moon." His mom patted him on the head and said, "That's nice, dear. Wash behind each ear. Don't eat peas with a spoon. Bedtime soon." But guess what? Bo's bubblegum balloons did get bigger and bigger until one day at play, he barely had time to cry, "Why, I," before he was sucked into the sky, clinging to that balloon, trying to stare, and at the same time keep clear of dread Mrs. Swizzle's washing. Now, Beauregard's been up an awfully long time, and the men have the blankets out to catch him when the bubblegum balloon goes pop in the sky. Here he comes again, and Grandpapa's climbed up to the topmost limb, stretching with his stick to reel Bo in, and look, Grandpapa's stick is stuck on the bubblegum balloon and it's lifting him up right out of that tree before he even has time to say, "Wee!" "Let go, Gramps," everyone cried. But it looks as if he's gone to join his grandson on that runaway balloon ride. Look again, something's happening up there. It looks as if the balloon is losing air. The blanket, quick, and the stick is going to snap. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to read a selection of from one of my stories in my book, Arrival of the Snake Woman, which actually this was the second book I wrote. So this is very old, but it's been published for the first time in Canada recently. So it's like, you know, seeing something from my youth all over again. The title story, the book is Arrival of the Snake Woman, and the title story is actually a novella about an Indian indentured woman who arrives in a Jamaican mountain village. For those who don't know, slavery was abolished in the British West Indies in 1838, and the British authorities assumed that the slaves who were of African descent would move away from the plantations, which many of them did. So they brought in other workers, indentured workers from Asia, Chinese, but mostly Indians, so of course Indians are known as East Indians in the West Indies. And significant numbers were brought, so that today half of the population of Trinidad and Guyana consist of people of East Indian descent. Not that many Indians were brought to Jamaica, and I couldn't remember. I grew up way up in the mountains, and most of the Indians were working in sugarcane, which is down on the plains near the coast. And I thought I didn't know any Indians until I was quite old, and then I started thinking about it, and I realized that in my village, in my mountain village, there was this one little Indian lady. And so I started wondering, well, how on earth did she end up there, you know? And this was the genesis for this story, because I decided to just write this story. about an Indian woman who comes into a mountain village in Jamaica, which is consists mostly of people of African descent. And but I set the story in the late 19th century, because the Indians first arrived in the 1850s. So I took it back 1 or 2 generations. And the Indian women then were called the snake women because they were wearing their saris, and the men were always talking about how they looked like snakes when they walked, you know. And this woman has no name in the story. She's known as Miss Cooley by everyone, and then she becomes Auntie Cooley and then Mother Cooley. And it's inappropriate to call people Cooley. That's insulting. But in Jamaica, if you're called Miss somebody, that's just part of the culture. Like, I'm not Chinese, but I get called Miss Chin, right? So it's in that context. And this woman is brought up to this hill village by a man who works in the cane. But the men in the village have drawn straws to see which one will have her, you know. So I mean, her coming is I mean, under the worst possible circumstances. And she's shunned for quite a while and so on, because one of the reasons is that the other incomer to the village is a white American missionary who, of course, sees her as a heathen and preaches against her and so on. And so for a long while, she's the outcast in the village. But the point of my story, it's called Arrival of the Snake Woman, is that this woman becomes the agent for change in this rather remote and backward village in the post-emancipation period. So everything happens because of her and because of what she brings to the situation. And the narrator of the story is a man who as a child befriends her as a young boy. And through her encouragement, he goes away to become a doctor. And so the story is told by him looking back at this period of his life. I'm just going to read a brief section where the boy has heard the men talking about this woman, the snake woman coming, and he's eagerly awaiting her arrival because she's going to be living next door to him. For the few weeks that Moses had remaining at home, the snake woman was the only thing they talked about when they were in their tattoo in the cockpits. I noticed that they never mentioned her if others were around. And I was too frightened to mention to anyone that we were talking about a heathen woman from the Ganges, as if she were human like us. And I was frightened by what Parson would say when they brought her into the district wearing, Moses told us, gold bangles all the way up her arms and her ankles, gold earrings in her ears, gold chains around her neck, gold rings on her fingers, and a sure sign of heathenness, a gold ring in her nose. Any thoughts I might have had that she was not a true heathen vanished when I heard this, for Parson Bedloe had been very explicit about one thing, and it was a heathen's sinful lust for gold. Their tinkling ornaments about their feet, the chains and the bracelets, the ornaments of their legs, the rings, the nose jewels, exactly as it was in the Bible. And yet I didn't care. I was already half in love with the snake woman, with her nose ring and tinkling ornaments and her outrageous barbaric ways. I could hardly wait for Cephas and Sanson to go with Moses to the bay and bring her back to the hills. Although I never heard the men tell anyone of their plans, people must have suspected that something was about to happen, for there was an expectancy in the air. And after the men finally left, and there was nothing unusual about his friends accompanying Moses back to the bay, everyone seemed to be excitedly wondering when Cephas and Sanson would return. Part of their interest was because the two men were making purchases for everyone in the district. But in my own excitement and my guilt, I saw them waiting expectantly, not for their pots and their cloth, their salt, machetes, and files, but for a snake woman to arrive. Every night in the yard next to Sanson's, I could hardly fall asleep, night after night, waiting for the squeak of the hampers on the donkeys that would signal that Sanson and Cephas and the snake woman had arrived. At that sound, I planned to rush out for my first glimpse of her. But the nights wore on and they never came, and I would fall asleep until dawn and my mother waking me. My first thoughts were always of the next yard, but it was too dark to see anything, and I had to be up to tie out the goat, fetch wood and water. Then I had to come back to the house and sit at the table and have breakfast, as my mother insisted. Another irritating thing she had learned from going to classes in housewifery, which Parson's wife, Miss Rita, had organized. The day was well advanced before I was able to shake my mother off and head for the bank of sweet-smelling couscous, which separated our yard from the next, to be greeted with the disappointing spectacle of an empty house. But one morning my heart somersaulted, for there, framed in the doorway, was a snake woman herself. Who else could it be? She was wearing her gold bangles and necklaces and earrings and a nose ring and a garment which seemed like bits and pieces of spiders' webs all draped about her from head to foot. Her head was covered, so I didn't immediately see her hair, which Moses said was black as a sinkhole and straight as Miss Rita's own, though the snake woman's skin was as dark as ours. And so it was. After the initial thrill, though, I felt a little let down. The snake woman was so small, her body as slender as a child's. And since she stood so still in the doorway, I had no idea what her hips were like, and if she moved like a snake when she walked, or even like a daughter of Zion. I wondered if Parson had had a premonition of the snake woman's arrival, for that Sunday he had preached fulsomely, warning the men against a specific temptation. The daughters of Zion are haughty, and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet. But what really held me even far away were her eyes, which were black like a dark night and took up half her face. And when I finally came close and looked into those eyes, they seemed so far away and sorrowful that I felt I was looking deep into the Ganges. But before that moment came, she vanished from the doorway. In a little while, I could tell from the smoke coming from the lean-to that she had got a fire going. How wonderful, I thought. The ashes have been cold in the fireplace for so long, yet here's a snake woman kindling a fire. Who could have imagined this happening in our district? But she soon disappeared from the kitchen with 2 large calabashes and began to look around the yard frantically. How like Son, I thought, not to have filled the barrel with water and to sleep late on such a morning. And though I was fearful and shy of the snake woman, of what Parson, everyone in the district was going to say, and though my heart was pounding just as it did when Parson was about to take me up in my lessons, I couldn't stand the way that frail figure stood lost in the early morning, and without conscious thought, I found myself moving from my hiding place behind the couscous and walking confidently towards her. I'm just going to read one more poem. It's very long, but please indulge me. I always read this poem because, in a way, it encapsulates a lot of my interests. I'm really interested. I started out as a writer, as most writers do, wanting to find out who I am, about myself. So I started thinking about myself in an existential kind of way, and then I became part of a wider group. So I started to think, well, who are we? And then I sort of, this was in Jamaica at the time of independence, when I was sort of conscious of these issues. And so, of course, there was a debate about nationhood, who are we as a nation, and so on. And so my thinking about history and identity and so on, although it started out with the personal, has grown, to take in ever widening circles. And since childhood, I've been really interested. Columbus is the person I most love to hate, because I have a lot of poems and so on about Columbus. Because when I was growing up, we were taught that Columbus, you know, he made landfall in the West Indies. And there were these sort of simple, primitive little people there. And they sort of vanished from the scene, you know. They're called, in the British West Indies, they're called Arawaks. But today, they're known as the Taino. They're identified as a separate group of people who might have descended from Arawak speakers coming from South America, but you know, they're now known as Taino. And far from being extinct, they're very much alive in places like Cuba, the Dominican Republic, the Spanish Islands. In fact, they've been doing mitochondrial DNA testing in those countries, which shows that over 60% of the population of those countries have Taino blood. But anyway, I've been absolutely fascinated with the Taino since childhood, because the question to me was, how can people just vanish, you know? And so I've done a lot of research about the Taino, and in my Encyclopedia of Jamaican Heritage, there's a lot about them. And I've also written a lot of poems about the Taino. This poem I'm going to read it's in two parts, and the first part is about the encounter between a nameless conquistador and the native peoples. And the second part is set in contemporary Jamaica, because I really believe that 1492 is still a very seminal event in our history, in world history, because it not only marked the encounter between the old world and the new, and between two sets of people, but it set in motion a lot of issues we're still dealing with today, one of which is racism, because Columbus was not sure that the people he met were in fact human. And there was in fact debates in Spain about whether the native peoples were humans or not. And I think that just set the tone for a lot of what has happened subsequently in the Americas. I mean, there are still people who do not feel that the native people, say in the Amazon, are humans, you know, and they're being exterminated. So this is one of my concerns. The poem is called Meditation on Yellow, and I'm using the color yellow to structure the poem. So a lot of the things that I refer to in the poem are in shades of yellow. And the great Colombian writer who claims he's Caribbean, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, he's into color symbolism, and his favorite color is yellow. And he was asked, what is your favorite shade of yellow? And he said, the yellow of the Caribbean seen from Jamaica at 3 in the afternoon. So that is part of how I use that to structure this poem as well, as you'll see. At 3 in the afternoon, you landed here at El Dorado, for heat engenders gold and fires the brain. Had I known, I would have brewed you up some yellow fever grass and arsenic. But we were peaceful then, childlike in the yellow dawn of our innocence. So in exchange for a string of islands and 2 continents, you gave us a string of beads and some hawk's bells, which was fine by me personally, for I have never wanted to possess things. I prefer copper anyway. The smell pleases our Lord Ukahuna, or Mother Atabyra. It's just that copper and gold hammered into one in, worn in the solar pendants favored by our holy men, fooled you into thinking we possess the real thing. You are not the last to be fooled by our patina. As for silver, I find that metal a bit cold. The contents of our minds I would have let you take for one small mirror to catch and hold the sun. I like to feel alive to the possibilities of yellow lightning striking, perhaps as you sip tea at 3 in the afternoon, a bit incontinent, despite your vast holdings, though I was gratified to note that despite the difference in our skins, our piss was exactly the same shade of yellow. I wished for you a sudden enlightenment that we were not the Indies, nor Cathay, no yellow peril here, though after you came plenty of bananas, oranges, sugarcane. You gave us these for our maize, pineapples, guavas. In that respect, there was fair exchange, but it was gold on your mind, gold the light in your eyes, gold the crown of the Queen of Spain who had a daughter, gold the prize of your life, the crowning glory, the gateway to heaven, the golden altar, which I saw in Seville 500 years after. Though I couldn't help noticing, this filled me with dread. Silver was your armor, silver the cross of your Lord, silver the steel in your countenance, silver the glint of your sword, silver the bullet I bite, golden the maca, the weeds which mark our passing, the only survivors on yellow streaked soil. We were the good Indians, the red Indians, the dead Indians. We were not golden. We were a shade too brown. At some hotel overlooking the sea, you can take tea at 3 in the afternoon, served by me, skin burnt black as toast, for which management apologizes. But I've been traveling long across the sea in the sun hot. I've been slaving in the cane rows for your sugar. I've been ripening coffee beans for your morning break. I've been dallying on the docks, loading your bananas. I've been toiling in orange groves for your marmalade. I've been peeling ginger for your relish. I've been chopping cocoa pods for your chocolate bars. I've been mining aluminum for your foil. And just when I thought I could rest, pour my own, something soothing like fever grass and lemon, cut my 10 in the kitchen, take 5. A new set of people arrived to lie bare-assed in the sun, wanting gold on their bodies, cane rows in their hair with beads, even bells, so I serving them coffee, tea, cock soup, rum, red striped beer, sensimilla. I cane row in their hair with my beads. But still they want more, wanted strong, wanted long, wanted black, wanted green, wanted red. They're not quarrelsome, I have to say, look, I'm tired now. I give you the gold, I give you the land, I give you the breeze, I give you the beaches, I give you the yellow sand, I give you the golden crystal, and I reached a stage where they were not polite. I have to say, lump it or leave it. I can't give anymore. For one day before I die from 500 years of servitude, I due to move from kitchen to front veranda overlooking the Caribbean Sea, drinking real tea with honey and lemon, eating bread, lightly toasted, well buttered with Seville orange marmalade. I want to feel mellow in that 3 o'clock yellow. I want to feel, though you own the silver tea service, the communion plate, you don't own the tropics anymore. I want to feel you cannot take away the sun dropping by every day for a chat. I want to feel you cannot stop yellow maca bursting through the soil, reminding us of what's buried there. You cannot stop those street gals, those treges, Alamanda, Cassia, Pui, Golden Shower, flaunting themselves everywhere. I want to feel you cannot tear my song from my throat. You cannot erase the memory of my story. You cannot catch my rhythm, for you have to born with that. You cannot comprehend the magic of anacondas changing into rivers like the Amazon, boas dancing in my garden, arcing into rainbows, and I haven't had a drop to drink yet. You cannot reverse Bob Marley wailing, making me feel so mellow in that Caribbean yellow at 3 o'clock any day now. Thank you.